A traditional garden demands replanting every single year. New seeds, new transplants, new soil amendments, new labor from scratch every single spring. A food forest gets planted once and produces food for decades. The difference is not a matter of degree, it is a fundamentally different system. A quarter to half acre designed with the right species, arranged across 7 vertical layers, replaces virtually every grocery category a family depends on. Fruit, nuts, berries, vegetables, herbs, medicine, and animal forage are all produced from the same footprint, without annual replanting, without purchased fertilizer, and without the relentless labor cycle that burns out most backyard gardeners within a few seasons. The system builds its own soil, it manages its own pests, it increases its output every single year rather than depleting the land beneath it. This video covers the exact layers, the exact species, and the exact planting order. By the end, you will have a complete blueprint for a system that feeds a family without a single trip to the grocery store. A food forest is a designed perennial ecosystem that mimics the structure of a natural woodland, except every plant produces something edible, medicinal, or functionally useful to the system around it. That distinction matters because it separates a food forest from both a traditional garden and a conventional orchard. A garden is an annual monoculture. Bare soil, single-layer planting, constant inputs, replanted from scratch every season. An orchard is a perennial monoculture. Rows of one species, bare ground between them, heavy pest pressure from the lack of diversity, and constant mowing to manage what grows beneath. Both systems fight nature. A food forest works with it. The model is a natural forest. In any mature woodland, 7 vertical layers coexist. Tall canopy trees, smaller understory trees, shrubs, herbaceous plants, ground covers, climbing vines, and root zone species all occupy different levels of the same space without competing for the same light, water, or nutrients. No one fertilizes a natural forest. No one weeds it. No one irrigates it. The system does all of this internally through leaf litter decomposition, nitrogen-fixing species, fungal networks that connect root systems underground, and dense ground cover that holds moisture and suppresses unwanted growth. A food forest replicates that exact biology with species selected specifically for food production. Once the canopy closes and the layers fill in, typically 3 to 5 years after planting, the system requires dramatically less labor, water, and input than a garden producing equivalent volume. The work decreases over time, the output increases. That trajectory is the opposite of everything annual gardening offers. Every food forest is built on 7 vertical layers. Each layer occupies space the others cannot use, which is why the total food production per square foot exceeds any single layer planting system by a wide margin. The canopy layer is the ceiling. Full-size fruit and nut trees such as apple, pear, walnut, chestnut, pecan, and persimmon grow there depending on climate zone. These are the long-term caloric anchors of the system, the species that take the longest to mature, but produce the most food for the longest time once they do. Beneath them sits the understory layer. Semi-dwarf fruit trees thrive in partial shade, like plum, cherry, mulberry, fig, and pawpaw. They are productive in the dappled light beneath the canopy, where a full-size tree would struggle. The shrub layer fills the next level down, with blueberry, elderberry, gooseberry, currant, and hazelnut. These are heavy producers in compact footprints that occupy the space between tree trunks. The herbaceous layer is where perennial vegetables and herbs live, including comfrey, rhubarb, sorrel, walking onions, asparagus, and perennial kale. These species return every year without replanting and serve both food and ecological functions simultaneously. Ground cover forms the living floor, with strawberry, white clover, creeping thyme, and wintergreen. These species suppress weeds while producing food or fixing nitrogen, or both. The vine layer uses vertical space no other layer touches. Grape, kiwi, passion fruit, and hardy hops are trained up trellises or into the trees themselves. The root layer works underground, with Jerusalem artichoke, groundnut, horseradish, and garlic. They produce caloric density entirely below the soil surface, in space that nothing above ground competes for. 7 layers. 1 footprint. Every level produces food while serving an ecological role that supports the layers around it. The average American family spends over $200 a month on fruit, nuts, and juice. The top 2 layers of a food forest replace that spending entirely once the trees reach maturity. A single semi-dwarf apple tree in full production yields 200 to 400 pounds of fruit per year. 2 apple trees cover a family's entire annual consumption, with surplus for cider, sauce, and drying. Pear, plum, and cherry trees extend the harvest window from midsummer through late fall, each one eliminating another line item from the grocery list. Nut trees provide what fruit trees cannot: caloric density. One mature chestnut tree produces 50 to 100 pounds of nuts per year. Chestnuts are a genuine staple carbohydrate. Dried and ground into flour, they replace a meaningful portion of purchased grain products in baking and cooking. Walnuts and pecans add high-fat, high-protein calories that store for months without processing. Persimmon produces a sweet, nutrient-dense fruit that dries beautifully for year-round eating. Mulberry and fig demand almost zero maintenance once established and produce heavy yields over long harvest windows. Pawpaw deserves specific mention. The largest edible fruit native to North America produces a creamy, tropical-flavored flesh in temperate climates. It almost never appears in grocery stores because it cannot survive commercial shipping and handling. A food forest owner has exclusive access to a fruit most people have never tasted. Preserved through drying, freezing, canning, and fermenting, the upper 2 layers of a food forest provide fruit and caloric staples across all 12 months. The produce aisle, the spice rack, and the herbal supplement shelf are all covered by the lower 5 layers. A mature blueberry bush produces 10 to 20 pounds of fruit per year. 6 bushes supply a family year-round when the harvest is frozen, dried, or preserved as jam. Blackberry and raspberry canes produce heavily for years from a single planting. Elderberry serves double duty. The berries make syrup, wine, and preserves. Elderberry syrup is the same product pharmacies sell as an immune support supplement for $15 to $25 per bottle. A single established elderberry bush produces enough fruit to supply a household indefinitely at zero recurring cost. Perennial herbs planted once produce indefinitely. Rosemary, thyme, sage, oregano, mint, lemon balm. Dried and stored, they replace the entire spice and dried herb section of the grocery store. Asparagus produces harvestable spears for 20 years or more from a single planting. Rhubarb, sorrel, perennial kale, and walking onions return every season without a single seed purchased or a single transplant started. Ground cover strawberries produce fruit while simultaneously suppressing weeds beneath them. Dual function from a single species occupying space that would otherwise require management. Grapes and kiwi trained on trellises or up into the trees produce fruit from vertical space that would go entirely unused in a conventional garden. Jerusalem artichoke spreads aggressively and produces massive yields of starchy tubers year after year, a caloric anchor working entirely underground. Medicinal species round out the system. Echinacea, valerian, chamomile, and calendula replace a meaningful portion of household pharmacy and supplement spending. Planted once, harvested indefinitely. The refrain of every layer in the system. A traditional garden loses fertility every season. Every harvest removes nutrients from the soil. Each year requires new compost, new amendments, new inputs purchased and hauled in to replace what was taken out. A food forest reverses that equation. It gains fertility every year through species that are specifically planted to build soil as a primary function. Nitrogen-fixing species are the built-in fertilizer factory. White clover planted as ground cover, autumn olive and gumi in the shrub layer, and black locust as a canopy edge tree all convert atmospheric nitrogen into plant-available form directly in the soil through symbiotic bacteria in their root systems. No purchased nitrogen, no synthetic amendments. The atmosphere supplies it and the plants deliver it. Dynamic accumulators do the work that no fertilizer truck can. Comfrey is the standout. Its deep taproot reaches mineral deposits in the subsoil that shallow-rooted plants cannot access, pulls those nutrients up, and concentrates them in its leaves. Cut 4 to 5 times per year and left where it falls, comfrey biomass decomposes into a nutrient-dense mulch that feeds the soil surface continuously. Yarrow and dandelion perform the same function at a smaller scale. Leaf litter from canopy and understory trees deposits inches of natural mulch every autumn. That organic matter feeds soil biology, retains moisture, and suppresses weeds without any human intervention. Beneath the surface, mycorrhizal fungal networks connect tree roots underground, transferring water and nutrients between species across the entire system. The forest feeds itself through its own root architecture. After 3 to 5 years of establishment, soil organic matter and biological activity in a food forest exceed most heavily amended garden beds. No purchased fertilizer, no compost hauled in. The system generates its own fertility faster than it consumes it. A monoculture garden is a pest magnet. Rows of identical plants send a chemical signal that draws every specialist pest species in the area directly to the food source. A food forest operates on the opposite principle. Biodiversity is the pest management system. Dozens of species planted together in dense, layered arrangements attract populations of beneficial insects that control pest species without a single spray application. Parasitic wasps, ladybugs, lacewings, and hoverflies establish permanent resident populations in a food forest because the diverse, continuous bloom cycle provides nectar and pollen from early spring through late fall. These predators suppress aphids, caterpillars, and mites at levels that a monoculture garden cannot achieve, regardless of how much it spends on organic pesticide. Aromatic herbs planted throughout the understory confuse and repel pest species that navigate by scent. Rosemary, thyme, lavender, and mint, scattered between fruit trees and berry bushes, disrupt the chemical trails that lead pest insects to their target crops. Structural diversity creates habitat for pest-eating birds, toads, and predatory ground beetles that patrol the system continuously. Pollination runs itself. A food forest is a pollinator paradise. Flowering species across all 7 layers provide forage across the entire growing season. Adding 2 to 3 beehives amplifies the effect and produces 25 to 100 pounds of honey per hive per year, replacing every purchased sweetener in the household. Chickens rotated through the food forest scratch up pest larvae and fallen leaf litter, eat dropped fruit that would otherwise harbor breeding pest populations, and deposit nitrogen-rich manure. Ducks handle slugs, snails, and ground-dwelling insects without scratching aggressively into the root zones of established plants. The food forest replaces pesticide spending, pollination uncertainty, and a portion of its own fertility cycle through species interactions built into the original design. Not purchased, not applied. Designed in. A food forest does not produce a full grocery replacement in year 1. It builds toward it. The trajectory, though, is unlike anything in annual agriculture. In year 1, ground cover, herbs, strawberries, and annual vegetables interplanted between young trees produce immediate food, while the perennial species establish root systems. Nitrogen fixers begin building soil fertility from the first season. By year 2 and year 3, berry bushes hit their stride. Asparagus sends up its first harvestable spears. Perennial greens and herbs are fully established and producing reliably. Young fruit trees are growing canopy but not yet bearing. Between year 3 and year 5, semi-dwarf fruit trees begin their first harvests. Grape and kiwi vines begin producing. Berry production reaches full volume. Ground cover is dense enough that weeding is essentially eliminated from the workload. By year 5 to year 10, canopy trees and nut trees reach meaningful production. The food forest is now generating hundreds of pounds of food per year with minimal intervention beyond harvesting. At full maturity, year 10 and beyond, a 1/4 to a 1/2 acre food forest produces more food annually than a family of 4 can consume. Surplus goes to preserving, trading, or selling. A traditional garden produces the most food in its first year and demands the same labor every year after. A food forest produces the least food in its first year and more food every year after with decreasing labor. The curves cross within a few seasons, and they never look back. Do not try to plant all 7 layers at once. In season 1, put the canopy and understory trees in the ground first. They take the longest to bear and need the most head start. Between and around them, plant nitrogen fixers, comfrey, clover, and ground cover species to begin building soil immediately. In the same beds, interplant strawberries, herbs, perennial greens, and annual vegetables for immediate food production while the trees establish. In season 2, add berry bushes, grape and kiwi vines, and root layer species. Ground cover begins filling in. Weeding starts to decrease. By season 3, the system is visibly managing itself. Mulch is self-generating from leaf litter and chop and drop biomass. Fertility is building without purchased amendments. The workload shrinks as the layers mature. Preservation bridges the seasons. Canning, dehydrating, freezing, and fermenting extend the harvest across 12 months so that a family eating from a mature food forest never faces a gap in supply. A quarter acre supports a complete 7-layer system for a family of 4. A half acre produces surplus year after year with labor that decreases every season. A garden feeds a family for a season. A food forest feeds a family for a lifetime. Subscribe to this channel for more permanent food production strategies. Drop a comment and tell us which layer you would plant first and what climate zone you are growing in.